everybody to the Yin and Yang Sisters podcast.
With Jean.
And Izzy.
Today we are doing our second segment of our relationship series. This is episode 2 of our three-part series. Like we were saying in our first episode, we are offering two fresh perspectives. I've got the ring.
And I'm chasing flings because I'm single now. This episode's going to be all about. So, that first episode was all about the beginning of the relationship and the chase. Now, this is the middle portion of the relationship. This is what we like to call the nitty gritty. Okay. Because this kind of is what's happening after the chase. So, once it's over, what are we doing next? Let's get into it.
All right. So now that, the chase is over, what would you consider is like when you're official, I guess? Like, do you feel like you need that verbal communication between you and I guess like your partner to be like, hey, this is official, like we're official, we're not we're exclusive together, like we're not seeing other people.
Yes. I think this area gets tricky for a lot of people because the whole situationship thing exists
Mm-hmm.
nowadays. Because like so many people are wanting relationships but not wanting to be like have the official title of being in a relationship, I guess. So I don't know. I feel like it's kind of strange the whole situationship thing. I kind of feel like you're either dating or you were together. And in order to actually confirm that, you have to verbalize and have a
Mm-hmm.
discussion about that. But I don't think a lot of people have those discussions. Like they just
These
assume,
days.
yeah, like
Yeah.
they just assume they're in relationships. Or maybe one assumes they're in a relationship and one doesn't, and they just miss that communication point altogether. So for me, I think if I were to ever get into a relationship, like a committed relationship with somebody, I would need to have a discussion about that to just be like, okay. Just so we're aware, like, are you seeing anybody? No. I'm not seeing anybody either. Do we want to like
Mm-hmm.
make this something more committed, I guess? Because I don't know. I don't know. It's been a long time though since I've
You've
been
had
like asked
that.
out. Like like not asked out, but like asked to be in a relationship. So I don't really
Yeah.
know how it works nowadays.
I definitely agree with you. Like, I feel like that's why I always tell you, like, I think it'd be so hard to date in this day and age. Because I just feel like, a lot of people don't have these conversations. They just kind of are like, well, we it's either like, okay, we're just not going to have this conversation and we're still going to see other people, or it's like, oh yeah, like we're on the same page about things, but like we just never knew we were like in a relationship together. Like I think for me personally, I would need that like confirmation because I don't know, I want to say it's to like or like ensure that in the future like um they're not going to pull like a one on me and be like, oh, well, we never made things official. So that's why, like,
Yeah.
I talked to
Or
somebody else, or like
yeah.
I was, talking to
Like
multiple people. Like,
yeah, like the way that I think about it too is like if I were to bring you around my family or my friends,
mhm,
how do I introduce you? Like I don't
yeah.
want to just be like, or what if like vice versa? Like you're introducing me to your friends and you're like, this is my girlfriend, and I'm like,
Hmm.
whoa, we didn't talk about that, or
Yeah.
like vice versa. What am I supposed to say? Am I supposed to like, this is my boyfriend, blah blah blah, or this is my friend, this is
Hmm.
my whoever? Like, what am I supposed to say?
Well,
That's
it's
something.
also so awkward too when you're just like talking or like you haven't verified things and you're like, oh, this is like the guy I'm talking to. Like, that's just so
Yeah,
awkward
and
for
then that
me.
sounds
Like,
like so immature. Like it sounds like
yeah,
you're in high school. Like I
yeah.
mean, to be fair, you are talking, and you could say like I'm dating them, but then some people say dating is the same as like being in a relationship. So
Hmm.
I don't know. To me, dating is like you're dating. You're not together.
Yeah.
Like the purpose of dating is to date multiple people, and he's one of the people you are dating. That's the way that I see it.
Yeah.
Versus actually being in a relationship and being a partner. Those
Hmm.
are like different.
Yeah,
So
for
I
sure.
think like I would introduce them differently. So in the future, if I'm like, this is a guy I'm dating, I'm just dating him, we're not together.
Yeah,
But
because
if
I
I'm
know
like,
you
this is
would be
my
like,
boo,
this
my
is my
boy, my
boyfriend.
love,
Yeah,
yeah, then you would know like that's somebody maybe I'm a little bit more serious about. But
right.
I'm also very I'm very picky about who I allow now into my life, like
Hmm.
in terms of dating. Like I don't even tell you. I don't even tell you that much, but that's just because I don't want to like I don't like to personally bring people around too early if it doesn't work out. Um I think
Well,
I would bring them around once I know I can trust them a little bit more.
yeah. And I guess it just is like, I think we've seen so many people or dealt with so many people in our families where it's like they introduce a significant other or someone that they're just dating a little too early. And then it's like the next thing you know, they're like broken up. Like it just makes it more complicated for like the family and like for instance like you if you were to bring a guy around it would just make things a little bit more complicated if like you're not dating that guy anymore and then everybody starts questioning you and starts
Exactly.
talking like
They're
asking
like,
you
oh, where's that one
questions.
guy that you brought last time? And it's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, we're not dating anymore. Like it just
Hmm. Having to
it
clarify everything and like yeah it's just
it just gets messy. That's why
yeah.
like like I think if I were to bring a person around, at least like I would have known them enough where I could comfortably say like, oh yeah, like we were I feel like I wouldn't bring somebody I'm just dating around. I would
Hmm.
want to bring around like somebody I am with and in a
Hmm.
committed relationship with.
Yeah.
So at least, but yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't understand how some people do this. And I don't know. Maybe I don't think it's a bad thing for like your partner or somebody that you are
Hmm.
in a relationship with to meet your friends or your family. But like, that early on when you're not even in a committed like an actual committed relationship, that's pretty bold.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like when you're bringing someone home to your family, you're like
It's pretty serious.
you're showing your family like, oh, I really like this person.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't just bring somebody that I was just messing around with or somebody that I was just like talking to and I don't know anything about them. Like I wouldn't just bring them around to my family.
Hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. Just my thoughts. Okay, let's see. So, yeah, that's on being serious. So now that we've kind of confirmed, at what point we become serious,
Hmm.
what are the top three things that you need in a long-term relationship to ensure that it lasts? So even though I am not in a current relationship, I have been in a long-term relationship. So
You can attest and
I
answer
can
this
kind
still.
of attest in some ways. Sure.
Hmm. I feel like okay, so what are the I would say for sure loyalty. Loyalty is like really big, obviously. I'm not gonna be with someone who's not loyal. Um, but I don't know. I just also feel like something I need in a relationship is really good communication. Like I think that's really key to like any relationship is communication and also understanding. Because you can like agree to disagree, but I think the ultimate thing is also trying to understand your partner and like the point of view that they have to bring to the table as well. Um, Granted, like I said, you're still entitled to your own opinion about things, but I also think it's very important to try to see where your partner is coming from. So I feel like those are like my top three
Mhm.
things.
I feel like to be in a long-term relationship, you do have to have so much patience
Agreed.
and you have to be able to I feel like it's a lot of it does require a lot of sacrifice,
Hmm.
but and it does require a lot of forgiveness. Like because ultimately like your partner is not perfect. Like no
Right.
one is perfect out there. And in a healthy relationship, like yes, people are going to mess up. Um,
Hmm.
And so you have to be able to forgive people. But there are breaking points for each one of those things that I said. Like there's only so much that you can take of something. There's only so much forgiveness that you can give out. There's only so much patience that you can give out to somebody, you know? So like,
Yeah.
but I do think those are important things for like a long-term relationship is that you have to sort of realize that like people are not perfect, that people are going to mess up. Like I'm going to mess up, that other person's going to mess up. But like
Yeah.
how do you deal with that? Like you said, the communication, that's one of the more important things. Like how do we resolve conflict? How do we like communicate our needs to each other? Like what is healthy, what are things that we're missing, what are the things that we love about the relationship. I mean, it doesn't
Hmm.
even all have to be like what do we need to improve on. It doesn't have to all be like
Yeah.
negative advice. It could just be like, oh, I showing little gestures of appreciation, and um, like that's something I kind of wish that I had more, was like just more appreciation, more
Yeah.
little words to show like you know that you care. It's kind of
Hmm.
some of the big things I think, especially for people I think who have that like love language of words of affirmation,
Yeah.
need to who should hear, or things like that. So yeah, I think those would be mine. It's like you said, great communication, a lot of patience, and a lot of ability to like forgive, and then sacrifices. Like there are some things you're gonna have to sacrifice in relationships, but
Hmm.
you shouldn't have to sacrifice that much. You shouldn't have to give that much, especially when it comes to yourself. Like,
Yeah. I guess sacrifice goes hand in hand with like compromise, you
oh
know?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Like you have to give up a
yeah.
lot, but you also have to compromise a lot as well. And same with your
Yeah,
partner.
that's a better way to put it. That's a better
Yeah.
way to put it. I don't know why I think of it as like a sacrifice, because
Yeah.
I mean it's a sacrifice, but you're
Yeah.
also mutually like sacrificing something to gain something.
Yeah. That's why I say like they go hand in hand, I feel like.
Yeah.
It's like, you are sacrifice there are times where you do have to sacrifice some bits of yourself, but I also feel like there's also a lot of times where you have to like compromise with your partner about a lot of things too.
Yeah, you have to compromise and just know like and that comes with also just knowing how your partner is.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's some things in your partner that they really need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
Difficult to change, but you can change. But I don't think you should ever change the core of who your partner is.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Agreed.
or change, like trying to make them be something that they're clearly not.
Like completely drastically different than like who they are. Yeah. I guess
Yeah.
that kind of leads into like when you're in a relationship and there is sort of like this conflict or like argument or something, how do you go about trying to resolve the issue at hand?
Hmm. I think honestly, when I was in this long-term relationship, I felt like I was still very immature in how I communicated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had a very hard time. Like I would have a lot of periods where I would just shut down, and I like wouldn't want to talk about it at first. Like if something was bothering me, and like I didn't really like something was really bothering me, and then this person would be like, what's wrong? I
Mm-hmm.
like wouldn't want to talk about it, and I had a very immature way of like opening up and actually being able to communicate things. So I would kind of have a period of shut down and just be like, I don't want to talk about it right now, and then
Yeah.
later be able to talk about it a little bit more freely. But um now, after like not being in that relationship anymore and having a lot of time to just like
Reflect.
reflect, think
Mm-hmm.
about like better ways that I can communicate, I feel like it's a lot better. I do have to still, I think, take like a little moment to myself to fully gather, because I don't like to just say what's on my mind
Yeah.
that very moment, especially in moments where you're like confident, you're arguing or you're
Mm-hmm.
fighting, and you like have so much emotions that like you sometimes say stuff that you don't actually mean, or you say
Yeah.
things actually thinking them through.
Yeah.
So I do like to take a moment to just be like, let me just pause and then think about it and then and talk about it. But talk about it sooner than later, I've
Yeah.
noticed, knowing how to fully articulate like what I want to get across.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that I've had to work on, not only just in like romantic relationships, but like in relationships in general with everybody, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then along with resolving conflict, yeah, that's kind of answers the other question, which is like, what's your typical stress response? That's another kind of added thing on top of this. What is your typical stress response, and then how do you guys usually resolve conflict in your relationship?
Uh, well, I can definitely say I agree with you in terms of like, I guess acting immature. Um, I think it just kind of comes with being with somebody so young and then
Yeah.
like being in a relationship with somebody when you were so young and still like throughout the years. Like I think it's just like kind of ingrained in your relationship because that's
No,
like
I
what
totally agree with
you
that.
know, right? Exactly. That's like kind of what you know initially, but I definitely will say for me, I feel like I've grown in that department. Not 100% because I think that's just like in me, like that's just my personality. Like I still feel like I'm very stubborn about things sometimes. Um and so I just feel like I I guess I might still have that immaturity in me, but I feel like um for the most part I like to just take the time to like talk things out. And I know Ong and I like we're the type of people where it's like we don't like to go to bed angry. We don't like to like not have anything resolved. We 100% like to talk things out, even if it delays plans or delays sleep or whatever. I think what's important to us is like getting through the challenge together, like being able to talk and discuss
Not
with
like
each other.
not delaying the issues or like sweeping it under the rug until it
Right.
be resolved. I think that's something I do notice about you guys is that when there's some kind of issue or when you're calling me like, oh my God, girl,
Yeah.
you're not gonna believe what
Yeah.
then after that you guys like talk about it.
Yeah.
That's something that I think is really good about you guys is that even though yes, sometimes like you have arguments. I mean everyone gets into arguments, and then you guys always talk about it, like sit down and talk about it
Mm-hmm.
afterward, really talk about it
Yeah.
and about what happened
Yeah.
because
I mean, I will say it wasn't always like that. Like, especially like early on in our marriage, I feel like we were just like arguing just to like argue and like we couldn't really get through to each other. Like there were a lot of times where it was like I'm calling like you or I'm calling like mom and like crying, talking to you guys about like our issues. And I think there was just like a big shift in like both Ong and I. And like I said, it takes two to really like make things work. But I think there was like a really big shift where it was like, we just need to like come together and talk about it together. Like, yes, I can vent to, my sister about it later on, like you, but it's like, I think we need to like solve it together first. And if I want to like just vent about the situation to Izzy or like to you, then it's like I can do that, but
yeah, 'cause obviously, like talking to somebody else about an issue that has nothing to do with them,
yeah,
it's not going to solve the issue, right? Like the
right.
issue is between you two, so you have to like solve it. But if you just need someone to vent to, just for the sake of venting to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
or to like, then that's what we
Yeah.
call, like that's what
Yeah.
we do for each other essentially. But ultimately, like the one you're gonna have to work it out with is your partner that you have the
Mm-hmm.
issue with. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I did notice that. Okay. What were the greatest challenges in each of your long-term relationships? You want to start?
Ooh, I feel like you can go first on this.
Okay. I don't know. There were like we're gonna talk more about this in the next segment, which is like the ending of a relationship, sort of. I
Yeah.
think some of the greatest challenges, um, I don't even know. It is. I think some of the greatest challenges in this long-term relationship is um just like knowing I think like for me, one of the greatest challenges for me personally was just knowing I feel like I should have known earlier that it was over earlier, if that makes sense. I think I developed so much tolerance in a relationship
Mm-hmm.
that I so much tolerance that I didn't really care anymore about of the stuff that was being done to me that was wrong. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like I tolerated so much and I just wanted um
It's almost like you were numb to
yeah,
it all.
yeah, I was like numb to everything and I just kind of let it slide and because I
Yeah.
tolerated too much. And like that was probably one of the greater challenges for me because I had to climb back up basically. The best way I could describe this is I had to kind of like climb back up this hill and realize how much I was missing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I always knew deep down inside like what I was missing, what I needed, but was
Yeah.
not in
I
this
just think
relationship.
you weren't ready to acknowledge it, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think like
Yeah.
a big part of it, of being in a relationship, like I was mentioning before, is like
Mm-hmm.
not losing yourself
Yeah.
in a relationship. Um, so that was probably like for me the biggest challenge was that I had lost myself along the way.
Yeah.
Um, and even though I was in a
Excuse
relationship or like I had family, I felt like I was supposed to be in a good place in life. I just didn't. Like
me.
I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what was wrong. And I think it's because a big part of it was because I had lost myself in the relationship. So for me, that was probably my greatest challenge was trying to, in the end, like find myself and then battling that with like, I think like realizing like that I needed more or I deserved more.
Yeah. Not
And I
only that you needed
get
more,
back to
you
who I
wanted
am,
more. Yeah.
like get back to who I am as a person because who I am as a person, it was not this person who just like tolerates stuff and just like
Mm-hmm.
doesn't say what she needs, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
I repressed a lot of myself and of who I was in the relationship. And that was probably my
Yeah.
downfall. But it was a challenge, but it was, it was in the end like the thing that brought me out of it.
Yeah. I will say for my relationship or my marriage, the biggest challenges for us is definitely at first it was long distance. I feel like that was like the biggest challenge for us is just being away from each other for such like long periods of time. Um, but I feel like as we obviously married and started living together, I feel like a lot more challenges came for us. Um, and like reality kind of hit a little bit harder. But I will definitely say integrating like the and like different family styles. I think that was definitely a really, really hard like adjustment for both of us. Um, because everybody's raised differently. Everybody goes through things differently and processes things differently. Every family is different. And so to bring two families into one, it's kind of like a shock to the system at first, I feel like. So I feel like that was like the biggest challenge. I also feel like um cultural things kind of was really hard. Um, Mostly I feel like for me. But I think those were like the main things. Obviously, like infertility later on, like now, is like a big challenge that we're kind of going through too. But I think we're starting to kind of come into our own and like get the swing of things. It only took like 10 years, but I'm all for it at this point. I think it's nice that we had this time to like grow together.
Yeah, I think like a question we had later on, but I'll just mention it now since we're talking about it.
Hmm.
It says, before marriage, how was it being in a relationship with somebody who had a different religious perspective from you?
Yeah.
And it's not just religious, but cultural perspective or cultural upbringing. Because if I'm being honest, we all grew up, us and Ong's family, we grew up very differently.
Yeah.
Um, so, how was it being in a relationship and then eventually marrying someone?
Yeah.
Uh, I think like being in a relationship versus marrying are a little bit different. So we'll just stick with, I guess, being the relationship part of it and the nitty
Hmm.
gritty. You know, I think right now we could actually talk about your current marriage experience as well and how that's changed or if it has changed at all. So talk to us more about that.
Uh, I will say during dating, I didn't actually think that much of it. I just thought like, oh, he's he has a different religion. I was raised differently with a different religion, and I honestly didn't really think it was going to be as hard as it was until marriage. But like while we were dating, I just kind of thought like, oh, like it's fine. They are different, we are different. They're more traditional, we're completely like more Americanized and stuff. So like I honestly, I guess, kind of was oblivious to it all, I feel like.
So like when you went to visit him and stuff, for
Yeah.
example, went to family events and all that stuff, like you would see all the stuff that like people were doing to prepare for events
Hmm.
or religious like events as well. Because only shaman, for those
Yeah.
in culture, and then we grew up in like a Christian Catholic like household.
Yeah.
So when you went to visit, you would like see these things, and you weren't like, oh, like I'm sure you probably thought to yourself like, oh, I'm gonna have to like, if I marry this guy, I'm gonna have to like do this someday, you know?
Yeah. Okay, if you want an honest answer, there were times when we were just dating and I would come and visit and they like did a shaman event. I was like very interested in it. I still am interested in it to this day, like the process and stuff. But like honestly, when they were doing these things while we were dating, like I said, I was very oblivious. Like I wasn't really thinking like, oh, one day I'm gonna have to like prepare and help. Like I really wasn't in that mindset at that time. Like I was very, very blind to it and oblivious. Like I think I just tried to like push that aside and not think about that, to be honest.
You're like,
Because
love conquers all,
no,
no matter what happens.
no, I just think I just think like it didn't cross my mind. I don't know if it was just because I was young and dumb and I wasn't thinking about that. I don't know. Like I knew marriage was in in the future for us at that time, but I just wasn't in the mindset of like eventually I'm gonna have to be the one to really like help do these things or do this or do that or like things like that. It really wasn't in my mind like at the time that we were dating. I was just like, oh, this is interesting, like why they're doing this or the the actual performance of like the shaman or like why they're doing this. I was really intrigued by it all, but it never actually crossed my mind at that time like this is going to be your
And
future. Like,
maybe for you, it was more so like you were more curious about learning about the culture. Also,
mhm,
because we did not have a lot of shaman events. Like, we did not
yeah.
grow going to a lot of like shaman events and stuff like that.
Mhm,
We kind of like didn't really know. So I think you were more like maybe interested in just generally knowing like his religion and his
mhm,
like the more in depth like cultural aspect of I mean, because I mean we're all Hmong, so like
Yeah.
we know some things, right? But we don't know everything. Like we did not grow up tradition like super traditional Hmong. And so
Hmm.
I think like you were more intrigued by learning
Yeah. Learning something completely like new.
yeah, learning something
Yeah.
completely new that you've never like
We never
experienced before
touched
or
that
seen before.
part of like the Hmong culture. Yeah.
Yeah. And then like you're like, oh my gosh. Like what after marriage you're like,
Yeah.
oh
That's what I mean.
woo.
Like it was a huge culture shock after marriage. But yeah, like while we were dating, it never really.
I still feel like when you tell me stuff, even like to this day, it's
Mhm.
still like a culture shock for me, only because like obviously I'm not around like anyone really who's like shaman either or
Yeah.
lives in like a traditional household. So sometimes when you tell me stuff, I'm like shook. Like
Yeah.
it's oh yeah, like it's shaman New Year, so like we can't spend money. And I'm like,
Yeah.
huh? Like it's just things like that, you know, that I
Yeah.
don't understand, but am willing to like learn, obviously. But
Hmm.
I'm just like, oh, like I
Yeah.
didn't know you could do things like that, you know.
I mean, I will say, like, even when we were just dating and they did do shaman stuff, like I it wasn't expected of me to help at that time.
Right.
Um, and so since there was no expectation of me to help, I think that's why I also didn't really think about it. Like, eventually, this is going to be me because, like, it wasn't like they were really enforcing it on me at that time and, like, oh, this is what you're going to have to look forward to in the future. It wasn't like anybody kind of like forcing that on me at that time or kind of like telling me, like, oh, this is what you have to look forward to. It was just like, oh, yeah, we're doing this. And like, you're here. Thanks for like helping. But it was never like, this is what you're going to have to do. Like, and I think that's why it never crossed my mind. But
Yeah.
it's definitely a huge culture shock. I feel like, we didn't grow up knowing any of this. And yeah, I was very intrigued by it. I still am very intrigued by it, and why they do some of the things that they do, or um, why certain things happen the way that they do. It's just very interesting. I will say that, but um, for sure, like culture shock. Okay, so what are your favorite types of dates or kind of dates to go on? Like,
Right. Because obviously, like going on dates
mhm,
be a regular thing.
mhm,
Like you know, they say when you're in a relationship, you should never stop, or in a
dating
committed
each
relationship,
other.
yeah, you should never stop dating each other. So
Mhm.
dates are fun. Um, I my favorite dates are where we actually go and do stuff together. Like I'm kind of more of a competitive, somebody with kind of a competitive edge.
Ooh, yeah.
So I love like dates where we can be a little bit competitive, like we can play games or like um kind of like challenge each other, I guess.
Mhm.
I went on a date one time with this guy and we went to this place called Putt Shack. It's
Oh,
kind of
okay.
like New York in Colorado, so we
Yeah.
went there. Basically like mini golfing.
Mhm.
They have a few different courses, but then they have like a bar and drinks and stuff like that. But I just thought it was really fun because it's just like something different. Like as much as I like to go to China restaurants or I like
Mhm.
to sit down and like have a face-to-face conversation with the person and get to know them that way. I just love like doing stuff
The
together.
funner
Having
dates.
yeah, having more fun
Yeah.
um on dates. I don't know why. But yeah, I think it's also too just because I'm competitive. Like even if we're just sitting in and like playing games or
Yeah.
something like that, where I could beat you, then I'll just have fun. I don't know.
You'll take
I'm
any
not too
chance.
big. Yeah, I'm not too big on like anything super fancy or like
Mhm.
extravagant.
Yeah.
You know? So, but if you take me somewhere where we can just play games and have a good time, like that's probably one of the more fun ones that I like. Yeah.
Okay. Uh,
So, how about you guys being in a long-term relationship now? Like, what are some, or long-term marriage, I should
yeah.
say. What kind of dates do you guys go on, or what do you guys like to do?
Uh, I would say my favorite dates are going to try new food for sure. Like a new restaurant, even it doesn't have to be anything expensive, honestly. Even if it's just like there for a little bit we were like, oh, let's go try all the like like the good local pizza spots and kind of determine like what we think is the best or what is our
Just read
favorite.
it.
Yeah, like we've done that before. Like we did that with Korean fried chicken. Um, and then
I know you guys did that with the Starbucks
yeah,
or
we like
Starbucks,
I think
all
yeah.
three.
Yeah, like we like to do little things like that where it's like all like you were saying the Starbucks lineup for like their fall drinks. We just get a bunch of their drinks and we kind of do like a taste test. Like I think those things are fun. It just like allows us to kind of explore and expand like our taste buds, which I really like. But I also really like that it allows us to really like sit down together and actually like face to face have like a conversation and talk about the week because like every day when we come home we're like, oh, how was work, and it was just like basic things, it's just like, oh yeah, it was good, but it's always very surface level. But I feel like whenever we do go out and eat, I feel like that's when like we're able to actually sit down with each other, kind of debrief on things either that have been on our mind or things that have been that happened during the week that we just never really got into. So
Yeah.
I really do like that it allows us to just like be able to sit together and enjoy each other's company, but also be able to like talk and discuss the week because when you're married, I'm sure a lot of people will agree, you kind of fall into like a pattern of like, oh yeah, it was just all right. Like the day was just good. Yeah. Nothing new. Like it's very, very surface level. But I think when you actually get the time to like sit down, have a discussion, um, I think it's really
Like,
nice.
yeah, and like catch each other up on
Yeah.
things that you didn't get to do like in
Yeah.
the rest of the week, or like
Yeah.
you just like didn't have enough time or energy to talk about earlier in the week that you're like, oh, guess what? Izzy called me on Wednesday. You know what
Yeah.
she said?
Exactly.
Just things like that.
Um, but I will say, like, I also really love like coffee dates. I'm a big coffee connoisseur. I do have an espresso at home, but I do really like being able to go and try like local spots, and just have like a cute little coffee date. I did actually really like, and we actually got this idea from you because you started going to like Saturday markets or like Sunday markets, things like that, like farmers markets. And I actually really did like that. That was something that we recently did, and I actually really like that because I don't know, I just like being able to walk around, see all the like uh local companies, like small local companies, and like being able to support those companies. Um, but it was also just kind of nice to get out and do something different than like the normal thing that
Yeah,
we normally do.
like instead of just like going to a restaurant, like you're getting
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of vendors,
Yeah.
which is really nice. I mean, I've gone alone, I've gone with people before. Like
Mm-hmm.
the last I think I went to was with Budora.
Yeah.
Uh, and that was still a lot of fun. Like she kind of pushed me to
Mm-hmm.
like do a lot more stuff, which I was like, oh, okay. Like I kind of need someone to help me do that. Like she'll be like, oh, let's go try that. And for
Yeah.
me, I'm like, I'm not gonna try it because then they're gonna try to like push me to buy
Or
it,
think like, yeah.
or if
Or
I
like,
take it and
oh,
I
if I
don't
try
buy
it, I
it,
have to buy it. Like you
yeah.
get that guilt.
Yeah, you get that guilt, like, oh, if I try it,
Yeah.
I buy it. Or if I try it and I just walk away, they're gonna think that I'm a bitch. Like, just things like that. So I was like, she's like, oh, you want to go try it? And I'm like, no. And she was like, come on, that's what the samples are for. Like, they just want
Yeah.
you to try it and see if you like it first. So I was like, okay. So then we tried it and we're like,
Uh-huh.
oh, okay, like not really our thing. And then we just walked away and they didn't say anything about it. And we
Yeah.
didn't talk about it, but I was just like, oh, okay. So it's not that like it's not that serious.
Yeah.
Like, you just kind of need somebody to do that. So that's why, yes, like you can go alone to those things like I've done before, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just better like to go with somebody. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad
Yeah.
that at least y'all gotta go together as a couple. I just
Yeah. I think it's
Well,
just like
I
a
don't want to say
cute
I
date.
just went with my aunt because going
Yeah.
was actually a lot of fun, but I
Yeah.
think it would be better someday.
Yeah, I think it's just like a cute date. It's something that you don't normally think to do as a date, but it's like it can be cute, it can be fun. And you get to try little like a bunch of different little foods or like fruits or things like that that you
Yeah. Do
normally
you
don't get to. So,
do you consider dates just like any time you guys spend time together?
together.
Yeah, because sometimes people like they'll just be like, "Oh, it's not a date. We're just going out to eat." You know what I
Mm,
mean?
I feel
I
like
don't know how you
anytime we
feel about
go, yeah, I know what you're saying. I feel like anytime we get out of the house, I consider that a date.
it.
But
Okay.
anytime it's like, oh, we're just like at home watching like Netflix, I don't consider something like that a date. I consider that like the day to day. But
Mhm.
anytime we can get out of the house, even
To
if
do something
it's, I
together.
mean, besides like grocery shopping, but like if it's like, even if it's just like a quick run to like Target and like we get boba on the way, like I'm like, oh, that's a cute little fun outing date.
That's
Like,
a little date. Yeah. Oh no,
yeah,
I agree. Okay,
yeah.
because I forgot who I was talking to, but I was like talking to somebody
Mm-hmm.
in our family, and we're just talking about like, oh, I think what the topic came up like, what is the cheapest date you guys have ever gone on, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, oh, like one time, like a long, long time ago when I like wasn't really working,
Yeah.
me and the person that I was with, like we weren't working, so we obviously weren't making money. We couldn't
Yeah.
really go on like real dates. So
Yeah.
we went to like a thrift store and we like picked out outfits for each other because we saw people do it. So we're like,
Yeah.
oh, we do it. I mean, we didn't buy them, but we just
Yeah.
like picked outfits for each other and we tried them on
That's
and like
cute.
the
See, like,
colors.
yeah.
But I was like, is it and then we got something to eat afterward. But I was like, is that considered well there and then some people were like, that's not a date. And I'm like, yes it is, because when you're like poor,
Yeah.
you can't like really do anything. You're still spending
Mm-hmm.
time together, you're being silly or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
like you're still spending time together, but you're not it doesn't have to be anything like crazy. I don't know.
You don't always have to spend money, I feel like, in order for it to be considered a date. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would consider that a date, 100%. But
Yeah.
I guess everybody has their
That's what I
own
was saying too.
different
I was
opinions.
like, well, I was like, but I'd say that's probably like the cheapest date I've gone on, but that's because
Yeah.
we don't like buy anything, but it was still fun, like at the time.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, mm. But yeah, but I don't know. Keep going on dates, y'all. Like
Yes,
seriously.
for sure. Never stop dating each other. I will agree with that 100%.
The next question is kind of a question I think that we would both like agree to disagree on.
Yeah.
So the question is, and I already know your answer to this, but is do you believe in soulmates or invisible strings? And do you think everyone ends up with them? Yes or no?
Um, I am I wouldn't say I'm like the biggest believer of it, but I do believe that for some people that could be the case. Yeah. Um,
I think you're downplaying it. I think you believe in it much more than you're trying to say it right now in front of all of us.
okay, I feel like okay, I don't feel like it's for everybody. I will say that. I feel like for some people there's way more coincidences and it's way more I feel like obvious that it was like an invisible string versus like some people I'm like okay, I don't get as many signs from you in your relationship where it's like, "Oh, I feel like that's like
Not meant
you
to
guys
be.
are meant to be," you know? But yeah, I agree. I do believe in invisible strings. I just don't necessarily
And
think it applies to everybody.
explain what an invisible string is for some people out there who may not know what that is.
So an invisible string is basically that you and your partner um have this like it's a literal invisible string. It's like a it's like a gold. I don't know. I've heard people say it's like a red thread, like an invisible red thread or like an invisible gold thread, which is why it's like a string that basically you're tied with your partner. You have like you're tied to them, but it's basically like you're always meant to be together, like kind of like soulmates, basically. Like you're meant to be together, and certain circumstances or the timing, certain situations kind of always lead you back to each other or lead you to each other. Um, but yeah, it's just basically like soulmates, the
Do
idea of
you
soulmates.
do you think invisible strings always have to be romantic? Like, can you have a invisible string out there somewhere that is like,
Purely friendship or
yeah,
like,
that's like a friend or like someone that you're just meant to come back to, right? Like, or like someone in your family, let's say, and then let's say for a little while you guys get estranged from each other, but you guys come back to each other. Like, do you think that invisible strings have to just apply to, do people only get one?
mm,
String? Or maybe you have more than one, or do you only get one forever?
oh,
Or who is it? Is it just romantically, or is it like just any relationship? I don't know. What is
um, I feel like for most people, when they think of an invisible string, they think romantically. I will say that. I think for most people, that's automatically like their first thought. And I think that is what the theory is that it's just like tethered to like romantic wise. But I can also see and understand like having strings and like an invisible string with like friends or
yeah.
like siblings or like things like that. But I think they're different.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think for the most part when people think invisible string, it is usually 9 out of 10 times romantically. Um, but for sure, like I think for some people it's like too obvious that it's like an invisible string to me. Or like it's like, oh my God, yeah, that's like definitely how you guys were meant to be together.
Yes.
Um, I don't know. It could just be coincidence. Some people say it's coincidence, but I'd like to think of it as like you were just so meant to be that the timing all worked out and you were just meant to come together. But I know you feel
Okay,
a certain way about
I'm
it.
not hating on it, and I'm not
Yeah.
saying I don't agree with it completely. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely a way, like, sure, that the universe works, like,
Mm-hmm.
to give you things, and
Yeah.
so I definitely believe in like that aspect of it. Like, oh, maybe, but for me, I'm more somebody who's like, things were meant to happen or meant to be, but they were not meant to last. Sometimes they're not meant to last.
Mm-hmm.
Because I always think like if you meet somebody, no matter who it is, like whether it's platonic or romantic, whatever, like you're supposed to, whoever you meet in life, there is always a reason that you met them. There's always like
Mm-hmm.
some kind of connection there, even if, but it's never always meant to last, right? Like sometimes that
Mm-hmm.
connection is very short lived, but it always serves some kind of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it doesn't always last. So that's more my mentality. Not necessarily that like you have somebody out there floating in the universe that like is
Mm-hmm.
meant for you and you're just waiting to find each other, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like I kind of feel like when I think about soulmates or like invisible strings and things like that, that's what I think most people think of is like, oh, there's somebody out there meant for me, or there's somebody out
Mm-hmm.
there supposed to be for me. Which I think if you want to believe that, you can.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, sure, I just think though, for me, it's like there's someone out there in the universe that is going to compliment you the best. And if it's meant to be, it will be. Like
Mm-hmm.
you may get together, you may, um, be in this like long relationship, but it may or may not be meant to last, you know?
Yeah.
And I think my mentality on that shifted a lot actually over the last few years after I got out of a relationship. Like,
Yeah.
because back then I was always like, oh, it was meant to be. Like,
Hmm.
this person was the person I was meant to be with forever. And then it didn't last forever. And then I was like, okay, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know if that maybe skewed my thoughts a little bit,
Yeah.
but I also, I think like just throughout life though, I think I wasn't as into it as you. I think you were more very much like about soulmates and stuff like
Hmm.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess backtracking, I think you can have multiple soulmates. You can have like a soulmate with like, for instance, like me and you, sister soulmate, right? Or friend soulmate, or like a soulmate romantically. But I feel like an invisible string, for me, when I think of it, it's mostly romantic. Um, and I just feel like I've seen so many TikTok videos where it's like they talk about their invisible string, and I'm like, oh my God, that is like crazy. They're like, oh, I somehow went to school with this person without knowing them, like they were in like fourth grade, or and I was only in like first grade or something. And it was like we went to the same school, we didn't know each other, but then like years later we ended up dating each other and finding out that we were like went to the same school together. And then I'm like, they're like, oh yeah, that's like your invisible string. Like you were meant to come back to each other at the right timing. Then like at certain circumstances like that, I'm like, okay, yeah, I could see that invisible string, right? But I feel like it, like I was saying, I don't necessarily see it with everybody. Like I believe in it, but I'm also like, just because you don't have those specific
Like circumstance.
situations, yeah, that like you're not meant to be with somebody that you end up with. I just think like it is possible, um but it's not
I
for
think
everybody.
you're more open. Yeah. You're like
Yeah,
more open.
I'm definitely more
For
open to
me,
the
I'm
idea.
definitely more like, oh, it's just a coincidence. Like,
Yeah. For sure, for sure, we definitely think very differently about it.
yeah. I don't know, but let us know what you guys think, I guess.
Yeah, everybody I
What's
feel like thinks has a certain way that they
different?
feel about it,
Yeah.
opinion. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So let
let
us
us know what you guys think,
yeah.
because
Are you guys on this side? Are you guys on her side? Are you guys on my side? Are you guys in the middle? Like,
yeah.
please feel free to tell us what you guys think because yeah, we
All
always
right.
kind of like have thought about this, but never really known what
Mm-hmm.
else thinks about this. I don't think I've asked this with anybody else really. So
Yeah. So earlier we were kind of talking about, the right time to meet family, which you said like a few months, but like when do you feel like is the right time to move in, and when is the right time for marriage?
oh. I think for me personally, I feel like I wouldn't move in with somebody for at least like a year in a committed relationship. Like,
I'm very
oh,
surprised that you said that.
really? Did you think it was like
Yeah,
shorter?
I think you would have at least said 2 years,
Um,
because I
yeah,
think you would have been
well,
like,
no, she's getting old, so like she doesn't have time to be like
no, I just thought you would have said 2 years because, I think, well, I've heard you say in the past, like a year isn't isn't if you really think about it, it isn't like that long of a time to really get to know someone fully. Like, yes, a year is a year, but like it's still not
I
enough
think
time to really
yeah, I think
see.
I still agree with that. I
Mm-hmm.
think though for that it would just be moving in. And
Mm-hmm.
then I think if you want to marry someone, it
Mm-hmm.
should be like a few years. Um, and the only reason I say like moving in after a year is because I think I would really want to see like what my partner is like and if I really want to
Before
marry
you commit.
yeah, because
Yeah.
um the way that I see it is like I don't want to do less than a year because I still value like my independence.
Yeah.
Like I still want my own space. I'm not sure if I'm ready to share that after a year.
Mm-hmm.
But if we like really liked each other and we were still really committed and willing to move forward, and after like a year they asked if I wanted to move in, I probably would say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like anytime between a year to 2 years for moving in. But for
Mm-hmm.
marriage, if you ask me to marry you after a year, I will probably say no. And it's not because I don't like
See a
or like
future.
or I don't see a future with you. It's just
Yeah.
I feel like that's way too fast. That's way too fast. Now, some people like I know some people in the comments are gonna come at us and be like, "Well, I knew my significant other after 2 weeks, and we got married in like 3 months." That's excellent. That's
Yeah.
good. But
Yeah.
for me, this is just my own personal like standard. Or some people got engaged like right at the 1 year mark, and I think if
Mm-hmm.
that works for you, then that's great. Everyone's story is
Yeah.
different, but for me, I just personally don't feel like a year is enough to really get to know somebody like that. That's why for me, the move in, I feel like you know them enough to know if you want to live with them,
Yeah.
but you know if you want to marry them.
Yeah.
But I just want to live with my partner before we get married, because I think living together will change things and you will actually see more of
Mm-hmm.
each other. You'll see more of each other as you really are, and
Yeah.
that's really can determine like, do I actually want to marry this person or not?
I 100% agree with that. Um, Only because I did things very unconventionally and I like didn't get that. I just straight up moved here when I got married. Um, so I think looking back, it would have been nice to be able to have that time to actually like live together for a little bit, kind of get acclimated with each other and like how the other person is, not only the way that they live, but also how they are on the day to day, because you really get to see somebody in their true colors when you actually live with them, deal with them every single day. You see the annoying little irks more, and you have to deal with it on a more daily basis. So I feel like true colors definitely come out more when you start living together. Um, but I definitely would have, if I could have, um, lived together first for like at least a year or two, and then I would have considered, you know, marriage after that.
I was literally just gonna ask you that. Like, if
Yeah,
you if you guys had the chance back then to like,
yeah, but
because
we were just so young.
in our culture too, like if you are gonna live together, typically
Mm-hmm.
you have to get married, right?
Yeah.
Before you can live with each other. Then that's
Mm-hmm.
something that I just don't. That's something
I
I don't
don't.
agree with. Is like I don't think that, because the rule is like, oh, you guys cannot live together at all, and
Mm-hmm.
you guys are only allowed to live together once you're married. I don't think that's right. Like I think
Yeah.
you should be able to live with them. So I was gonna ask you, like, if you had the chance back then, without any cultural things getting in the way, if you guys could have
Yeah.
lived before getting married, would you have done it?
I will say I tell Ong this all the time. I'm grateful that we got married when we did and that we had so much time to work on ourselves. But I also tell him too that I wish I didn't we didn't, I guess, get married as soon as we did. I wish I would have stayed in Colorado at least until I was like mid 20s. That way I could have enjoyed my time with my family more and also um been able to just like have that time, because I didn't really get that. Like I didn't get to, I guess, like live the typical life where it's like you're 21, you kind of get to go out, you get to kind of get to have fun, right? I didn't really get to experience any of that. And I think it would have been fun and nice to experience that with like family or like, like all of our cousins, like be able to do things like that with you guys for a little bit longer at least. I think that I would have,
You like literally just went straight from like our
yeah.
house to
And
another person's house. You didn't have that period of like independence.
right. And I didn't get to really have that slow integration either, where it was like, okay, we are living together, but we're not married yet. Like I didn't really get to have that. And so it was just like all at once and it was a lot. So definitely if I could have gotten away with living together for a little bit and also waiting to get married, I think I would have looking back. Um, but I also understand why Ong and I decided and wanted to get married as young as we did too, because doing long distance, it really does sort of speed up the process of things. At least for us, it did, because, it's really hard not to be able to um, see your significant other as frequently as you would like, especially because like you're in a relationship, you want to be able to like go on dates, you want to be able to like see each other, things like that. But yeah, I I I there's definitely a reason why we, I guess, rushed things. But
Yeah.
if I could have, I would have definitely taken my time for sure.
I definitely think that long distance is, well, when you're like in a committed relationship with
Hmm.
or with each other, you definitely have to see how that other person deals with like stress. Like,
Hmm.
and long distance can be, or with challenges, right? So like long distance, for example, can be one thing, or let's say like one of you has something like with your family or some kind of family emergency or a loss in the family, like how do they deal with that? How are you there
Hmm.
for that? And so for you guys, it obviously was long distance for a pretty long time
Hmm.
before you guys got married even. And
Yeah.
so, you know, I think like the expedition of things made sense.
Hmm.
I think it was a little bit too like much, like you said.
Yeah.
Um,
Too much
I,
too
I
fast, I feel
yeah,
like.
where it was just like, oh my
I
gosh.
mean, but granted, like we were together for like 4 years before he proposed. So like I think when you think about it like that, it's like, okay, yeah, we were together for a long time. But I also think like if you actually think about it, we were still so young and such babies that like,
Okay, and just so you guys know, she got married at 18.
yes.
She wasn't like a child bride.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, it's 18, so still young. Like you're barely an adult by
I feel
then.
like you're just a babe. Like, yes, that's technically when
I'm
you
27. I still feel like a child.
well,
Like,
I mean, like, yes, technically 18 is considered an adult, right? But I definitely feel like looking back, you're still such a baby at that point, and give yourself time to grow and season a little um before marriage. Because doing the work while you're married, I will say is a lot harder than doing it when, you're not married. Because you have another whole person to think about. And on top of that, when you're married, you're dealing with a bunch of different things at the same time. And to also have to work on yourself and those things, um, it just is not going to make your life easier. So,
yeah, to like work on yourselves, but also work
yeah.
on marriage. But then you guys had family stuff, and then it was just like a lot to do. I think like at the beginning,
Hmm.
it was just like a lot.
Well, yeah.
So
And like I said, you also kind of miss out on certain experiences or um, certain things in your life when you marry really young. Not to say that I couldn't have done it. I just worried, obviously, back then, I just worried a little bit too much about the opinions of others that I didn't do
mhm.
it. But I did have a few good rave days. I did have a few good going out to the bar nights. It's not like I didn't have that at all, but um, it's definitely different when you're married because, like I said, you have to consider a whole nother person into things. But yeah.
Okay. This one. So you had this one's more a question towards you personally. But you had kind of like a friends to lover trope. Um, so at what point did your relationship shift from being friends to being something more? Like what was, I guess, I don't know, I guess I'm just curious, like what was the thing that pushed you to be like,
I
oh,
want to pursue a relationship with him.
oh, we're not just friends.
Yeah. Um, I honestly don't really know. I just know that like we were friends for a really long time, and then it was like no pressure on his end. Um, and I think what really shifted for me is as I was talking to like other guys while he was like my friend, I could really rely and support, like rely and get that support from him um about me talking to other guys at the time. Like he really was just a friend that I could like talk to and like seek his advice. And then I think when I started to realize how much he supported me and how much he actually was there for me, I think that was when I guess the shift happened. Is like I really started to realize like he is a really good guy. He takes the time to like listen to me ramble or I guess vent about certain situations. And I think, you know, that's when I saw like a different side to him where I was like, okay, that's something that I would want in a relationship, right? And so when I started to realize these things about him, that's when I was like, okay, maybe I do want to pursue something with him because that is something that I want in a relationship and that's something that I want in a future partner. And obviously, I wasn't getting it from anybody else, and that's when I was like, I could really rely on this guy and I could really trust him and like genuinely count on him to be there for me. That it was like a slow burn for me where it
Yeah,
was
like a
like,
slow realization. It wasn't like
yeah,
boom, like I know.
yeah, it wasn't just like, oh,
It
automatically
was
like
not one
within a
like
snap of
pivotal
a
moment
finger.
where you were
Yeah,
just suddenly
yeah,
things like
yeah. It was definitely like I started to realize these things about him and how he was and his nature and his personality. And I was like, yeah, I that's really the type of person that I could really see myself with and that I wanted to be with. And that's why I think this I started to slowly um change my perspective of him and the way I felt about him is because I started to see potential in him um with what I wanted in a future partner. So, yeah, that's it's crazy to really think like we went from friends to being in a relationship because honestly, I was the one that fell first. I don't think he really felt for me in that way until I acknowledged that that was how I felt. Um, but yeah, it's funny when I think about it because now we're just like inseparable and like I just feel like we're just so meant to be now. It's crazy. No, but really, it is crazy how things kind of like progress the way that they did, and like looking back because we solely were just like friends at the beginning, and it was just it's so funny when I think about it because I literally would like be talking to other guys and they would be annoying me that I would always call Ong and be like, "Hey, can you like can we three-way?" And you can like just like basically shut them up because they're being annoying. Like there was times where like these two guys were singing very annoyingly and then I literally called Ong and I was like, "Hey, you know how to sing really well. Can you like can
show
I
them
three
up.
can I
Show them
yeah.
up.
Yeah." So he did. And yeah, it's just funny thinking about these things. But Yeah.
But at that time, you guys were just friends,
Yeah.
and he was, well, I don't know. Maybe we'll have to, if we interview Ong, we can kind of ask him about this and like if he had any kind of feeling at that time or whatever, you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, I'm just curious as to whether like he was already into you at that time, but just never wanted to admit it or what the case was. Because I think if I was somebody's friend, I'll be like, no, I'm not gonna sing just to show
Yeah.
people what's wrong with you. Like that was just your friend. But I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe it's just like nice like that. Who knows?
Okay. So I guess these questions pertain a little bit more to you and your previous relationships, but how was it for you to be in a relationship with somebody who had a completely different level of ambition or like career goals from
Mm, hard.
you?
For me, I don't necessarily need somebody who has like this high paying job or anything
Hmm.
like that. I don't necessarily think that having a lot of money or your position um is everything, you know?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that, but I just think that you need to stay ambitious. That's like something that's very important to me.
Hmm.
Because I'm ambitious. I'm always trying
Yeah.
to not necessarily be the best, but I'm just trying to consistently better myself to
Yeah.
so I just expect, I guess, the same from my partner that like even if they're maybe like their position, like let's say they're like a server at a restaurant or something like that, even if
Hmm.
they're just a server, like they're, you know, actively trying to be more, right?
Yeah.
Um, or like if something happens, like a challenge, particularly with their career or something like that, then they keep pushing more to like create stability for themselves, you know, because
Hmm.
that's something that I have maybe I don't maybe it's just something ingrained with me, but I'm always rooted in being stable, like
Yeah.
for myself, not only financially, but like just my like well-being in general. So like I kind of would expect that from my partner as well. But when I was
Hmm.
in a relationship with somebody who just kind of like wasn't as ambitious, it was very hard because as much as I wanted to like push that person
Hmm.
to like be more ambitious or to be more to try harder, like they just didn't want to. So
Yeah.
there was always just like clash, always just like clash of like, oh, like you're trying to make me something into something I'm not, or like,
Hmm.
and it was hard. And then at the end, I do feel like I like what's the right way to say this? I kind of like lowered my standard for that one person. And I don't think
Yeah.
that I would ever do that again. I mean, I think you should help your partner, sure, if they're like having a period of struggle, but
Hmm.
like if you don't want to help themselves,
Hmm.
they don't want to like try, they don't want to have that same goal as you, then it kind of just drags you down. Like for me, it
Yeah.
dragged me down. I felt like because like part of me also didn't want to feel like I was also being intimidating, like I was better than my
Hmm.
partner, you know?
Hmm.
Um, because like I didn't want to feel that way. I wanted us to be seen as equals,
Right.
you
But
know,
you also wanted him to do it on
for
his own
himself. Yeah,
terms
I think I
and
just
for
wanted to do it
himself.
for
Right.
himself. And that's why I think I want someone who already has that in them, who already has
Ingrained in them. Hmm.
ambition in them, because then I don't have to push. And because I was pushing so much, like I kind of looked naggy. Um,
Or you're taking
I
on the
looked like,
role of like a mother.
yeah, like I
Hmm.
was like a mom. I was not a partner, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, yeah, it was really
Difficult.
hard, I
Yeah.
think, and difficult. And I think like if you're in a relationship and you're in the nitty-gritty of this relationship, like you do have to push your partner a little
Hmm.
bit, but you shouldn't have to push them to the point where like you're nagging them, like you're their
Yeah.
mom. You know,
Okay,
they have
I
to
guess
have
that kind
that.
of goes into they always say like if they wanted to, they would. Do you
Mhm.
do you believe in that? Like I guess for
Um,
in your instance, if your ex wanted to improve and work on himself and build a better future for himself, he would have.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because and then I don't necessarily think it's just him, but I think that applies with anybody, like no
Mm-hmm.
matter who you are. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you really want to, you will do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so unfortunately for me, I kind of like overlooked a lot of this
Mm-hmm.
because when you're like in love and you're in a relationship, you put on these rose-colored glasses and
Yeah.
you don't see a lot. And so I kind of overlooked a lot of this, and I just kind of, I
Mm-hmm.
think, felt like I was helping and I felt like I was doing my best. But I was like, if I'm like doing my best to help
Yeah.
you, but you're not even doing your best to show up or to like
Yeah.
show up for yourself, like
Yeah.
you can't even show up for yourself. You can't show up for this relationship. And
Right.
so, but that's something I overlooked when I
Mm-hmm.
was in it, But when I look back on it,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, like I really overlooked that, and that's not something that I never want to overlook again because
Yeah.
it took, like I said, it took a lot from me. It drained a lot out of me, and I
Mm-hmm.
lost a lot of myself in that process because I didn't want to look like I was better.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
as sad as that sounds,
Yeah.
I didn't want people to look at us and be like, "Oh, she's like way too good for him."
Yeah.
I don't think you ever want to look at a couple
And
and
think
think
like,
about them.
yeah.
You want to look at them and be like, "Wow, they really match. Like they really
Mm-hmm.
with each other."
They're really compatible, right?
Yeah, or like even if they're not the same, like they balance each other out, you
Yeah.
know. But when it comes to anything with like stability, whether it's stability with financials or stability with your own personal self, like knowing who you are, being emotionally like aware and intact with yourself
Yeah.
and not being emotionally like immature.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like kind of something I prioritize now. But it was very
Yeah.
hard.
In the moment. Yeah.
It was very hard in the moment. And I think it was harder on me than I let on. I
Right.
always was like, oh, it's fine, it's fine.
Yeah.
These are good. But it was not good. It was
Yeah.
not good.
And for sure we'll definitely dive into this your your last relationship. We'll definitely dive into that in another episode for sure. But um today, I guess another question that I just kind of briefly want to touch base on is how was it for you? And I guess we both can kind of talk about this because I feel like even Own isn't like the most sociable person. But how was it being in a relationship with someone who just wasn't really socialable, right? Sociable or like very social with, I guess, like your family, your friends, things like that.
Hmm. Also hard. Like I don't know. It's hard because like I you always say to me like, "Oh, Izzy's such a social butterfly. She's so
Mm-hmm.
popular, whatever." And I'm really like social when I want to be, but I'm also very introverted and like to just have time to myself a lot as
Yeah.
well. So I do understand kind of like I don't know. I guess I would say I'm introverted, but I don't have like social anxiety
Yeah.
like people, like
Uh-huh.
if I'm in a social setting, I maybe might not talk to people, but if you approach me or if we're in the right setting, I will be social. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Or I know how to be social. So like I could understand like not everyone is built this way. Like not
Mm-hmm.
everyone's built to be social. So I could understand that, but oh, it was hard. I think like if you're in a committed relationship like that, you should make more of an effort to really get to know your partner's close circle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that those are the people that your partner is with and who are going to be with your partner whether you are there or not.
Yeah.
So that those are the people who have the highest influence on your partner, right? And you should get to know who these people are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know, it just didn't, especially with our dad's side, like I didn't feel like he was as social with them
Mm-hmm.
as and I think maybe it had to do with age because like a lot of the people on our dad's side are like our aunts and uncles, but even then, like the people who were our age, like our cousins,
Mm-hmm.
their husbands, like he just never really got along or was never really like talking or
Yeah.
social at like that. I actually don't even really feel like he came around that much.
I
Um,
will say, um, I think maybe the reason why he was not as social with our dad, well, with our dad's side, is because they knew, like, it goes back to being ambitious. They knew how ambitious you were, and they knew how much, like, how many goals you had. And I think it was more obvious to him, probably, um, that they probably had that idea of like, I'm not, like, he's not good enough for you. I think it was more like, I think he was able to see it more with our dad's side versus our mom's side. Everybody, like you were saying, everybody's the same. So, like, all our cousins are the same age. And like all of our aunts and uncles, they, on that side, they're not as vocal about these things. But I feel like on dad's side, it's like a little bit different. And I think maybe he understood or realized that you probably were too good for him.
I think
And
too, with like our dad's side,
mhm,
like they are just like not like they're a little bit more. I don't know how to explain it. Like I guess it's a little bit more like not serious because we're very like silly, but like like everyone is has their partners, like everyone has their partners and they have their children and you just see a little bit more of like the seriousness of like marriage and a
mhm,
relationship, and how serious it is to find like the right partner, right?
mhm,
Versus like on my mom's side, like some people like most of us are like in relationships or like single, or we had like one or two, three cousins maybe that were like married at
mhm.
the time. And so like the idea of true commitments and like marriage and things like that, it wasn't as serious because everyone was still floating on the same boat of like, oh, we're still just like dating, we're still just having fun.
Yeah.
Versus like dad's side, it was like, oh, like this is actually real life. Like,
Mhm,
and you're done having fun. Like this is what your
mhm.
life's gonna be. And I
Yeah.
think for him, he really realized maybe like, oh, like 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 this is what like real life is gonna be like after this
Yeah.
fun tour. Like maybe I'm not meant for this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe I'm not, maybe, yeah. Well, maybe not, I'm not meant for her, not meant for this, like
Yeah.
meant for stuff, but not meant for her. Like this isn't, you know. So I don't know, but yeah, it was hard because I would want him to show up to events, but he just wasn't very social. He was always like, I want to stay home and play games and
Mhm. Well, I will say there were certain things I feel like that happened, situations um that happened that also kind of led to him being very distant with that side. We
uh,
will go in more detail about that with
next
your
next episode.
yeah, but I will definitely say there was definitely a shift between like our mom's side with how he was with our mom's side and then how he was with our dad's side. Um and I know with our dad's side they had their opinions about him, and kind of thought like they did a lot of comparing about like between you and him and like how you're obviously more ambitious and you want to have a lot of things going on for you in your life and you think about your future and like things like that. And I know that they always had their opinion about these things, but they never made like brought it up or made you feel a certain type of way about it, you know? They
I
always
agree.
just
Never
kept it to
felt,
themselves.
yeah, like I never felt like there was ever any like animosity. Like I honestly I
Yeah.
didn't know about any of this really until like after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
And so but anytime he was around, it's not like they said anything to him or it's not like well, some people said things. We'll get
Yeah.
into it. But
Yeah.
it's not like he ever felt I truly don't feel like our family, our dad's side made him feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But I just felt like he always was. Or whenever he was there, it was like I just felt like it was so disrespectful too with um like when you don't even want to be like you're in the same house but you're like alone in like
Mm-hmm.
this living room while everyone else is over here.
Yeah.
Like I don't I think like if you're over there to just kind of like get away for a moment, sure, but if you're over there like the whole day,
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of like defeats the purpose of why you're there, you know?
Yeah.
So I felt like it was really hard to get him to socialize with particularly my dad's side. But
Yeah.
even then, like when we would go and do stuff with our mom's side, like we'd go to shows and we'd go to, we go to certain events and stuff like that. Like, kind of wouldn't really want to go. And I
Yeah.
was just, well, that's not gonna stop me, and I would go.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
it just like it's different because like he didn't want to go out and be like. I don't think he genuinely wanted to go out to be sociable. Like he just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
be home. And don't get me wrong, like I think staying home can be very relaxing. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think there's anything wrong with being a homebody,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, it's just hard. I think like you do have to compromise, like you said, if you're
Mm-hmm.
in a relationship, like you have to give and you have to take a little bit.
Yeah.
But I felt like it was more like,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Well, it's so funny to me because I mean, I told you I can kind of relate to this question as well because not to say Ong isn't social at all. Um, I will say he's more on the quiet end. It's not like he's antisocial and won't like talk to you or like if everybody's in one room, he like shifts to the other room because everybody's there, like he's not like that, but he's definitely not like super social. So I definitely think it is interesting though that I feel like with Own, it's opposite. I feel like he's a little bit more social and a little bit more comfortable with like our dad's side versus our mom's side. And not to say that he's not comfortable with our mom's side. I just think like he's able to come out of his shell a little bit more with our dad's side because he could relate and kind of talk to them about more things than mom's side, Um, because he always tells me all the time, like, it's not that he doesn't talk to our cousins on our mom's side or our aunts and uncles on our mom's side, but he can't relate to a lot of the things that they're interested in. Like for Ong, it's like he's very interested in sports and games, like video games, right? And you know, that's more with like our dad's side, like the guys on our dad's side, they're very much into sports and things like that. And I think that's why he has it easier, like it's easier for him to communicate and have like conversations with that side versus like um our mom's side, it's not that he can't have those conversations. He can with some people that are interested in those things. But
yeah.
like
But like
for
the OGs are like still
well,
OG.
yeah.
Like,
But like
oh,
in terms of like the cousins, like he's not really into like EDM music. He's not really into raves. He's not really into like those sort of things. And then like he can't really relate to have a conversation with like some of the cousins on our side. But it's not that he's not there and present and he's not involved at all in those conversations. It just um takes a little bit more out of him. Like he has to really push himself. Yeah. A little bit more with mom's side versus dad's. It just comes a little bit more natural, a little easier. Um, but I think for me, the thing I appreciate the most is that he's there, and if people want to have a discussion with him, that he's comfortable enough in himself to sit there and still have a communicate like a
Yeah.
conversation
Like
with
he's still
people.
comfortable enough to have a conversation with somebody. He doesn't make it uncomfortable for the other person. All right, so
Right.
that is going to be the end of this episode. Thank you guys for listening to Relationships 101, the nitty gritty. If there's anything else that you guys want us to talk about in future episodes in terms of relationships, feel free to let us know. Stay tuned for our next episode where we get to the dreaded goodbye. Literally to this segment, but also to the end of the relationship, right? So, what happens when things don't go as planned and a relationship ends? Until
Until
then,
then, bye,
fish.
fish.